covers us. Your love is fierce, your love is strong, it is furious. Your love is sweet, your love is wild, and it's waking hearts to life. Love is deep, yeah. Love is deep, your love is wide, and it covers us. Your love is fierce, your love is strong, it is furious. Your love is sweet, your love is wild, and it's waking our hearts to life. Love is fierce, your love is strong, it is furious. Love is sweet, your love is wild, and it's waking hard to life. Oh, your love is deep, your love is wide, and it covers us. Love is fierce, your love is strong, it is furious. Love is sweet, your love is wild, and it's waking hard to life.
Seat for a moment. Good morning. My name's David. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. Just wanted to take a moment to welcome you. I know this is confusing for those of you who are here every week. Normally there's at least one more song before you get to hear from me or from Matt, announcements, updates, and things like that. I think this will probably be the most jarring moments of your morning, only getting one song before hearing the announcements, but who knows? We're always full of surprises. So, a couple things we want to draw your attention to. The first is that our first ever regional collective gathering is tonight. Now, some of you might be thinking, that's not true. You've been making us break up into our regions like every single Sunday. What I mean, though, is this is going to be our first regional collective gathering in the actual regions. So, for the uninitiated, we have been thinking through ways to make it easier for everyone to connect. And because you live all over the Charlotte area, and because whoever designed the roads in Charlotte didn't do a good job, we want to make it as easy and simple and accessible as possible for you to connect with the people within this community who live near you. And so we have indeed taken the last couple of weeks to help introduce you. We've had things going on during or immediately following the service so that you could meet the people who live in your basic sort of general part of the Charlotte area. And now we're inviting you to actually go to one of those people's houses, something we all used to do regularly before COVID. And just hang out with each other, have a good time. And so if you are not sure what your region is, you can follow that QR code on the screen. All this information is also on our website and on our Watershed app. And you can figure out what your region would be. You can RSVP, or you can just surprise everyone and show up this evening. But 5 to 7 p.m., in your regions, strongly encourage you to do this. It's going to be a great time. There are so many things that we want to do kind of through this regional expression mentality, both socializing and fun stuff, but also justice and liberation work and things like that. We have big plans for it. So this is the kickoff. We would love for all of you to be a part of it. Additionally, I'm really excited about this one. So a few weeks ago, Blair, our family pastor, sent out a survey, and we incentivized all of you to fill out the survey, promising that there would be a random drawing at some time later, and the winner of that drawing would get to have free babysitting from Blair, who is a phenomenal babysitter. And we did that drawing, and someone won. So I am super tickled to announce that the winner of the drawing, what is this graphic? Oh, it worked, yeah. Morgan of Mark and Morgan fame, Morgan Yeri, that's who won. So I don't think I've seen Mark and Morgan yet this morning, but the lights are really bright, so I could be wrong. But they won, and they might already know. Maybe Blair emailed them. I don't know. But congrats to them, and thank you to all of you who filled out our family ministry survey. Everything that happens down that hall and in the basement will be better because of your contribution. All right. Very soon, we have we have a lot of things coming up. Just to kind of preface it, and I use that word intentionally because one of those things is, in fact, preface. So we have Preface and Liberation beginning May 31st. If you're brand new, you've never been here before, you've only been here a couple times, please go to Preface. It is the opportunity to learn pretty much what this place is about, sort of the history, the evolution of it, but crucially, you get to meet other people, you get to hear their story, share your story. The relationships that sort of are forged in Preface translate to pretty much every other part of Watershed, so do that. But if you've already done Preface, then join me and many of our kindred community in Liberation Identity. It's going to be a 4-week experience where we explore the intersections between justice and spirituality through the lens of identity. It's the first time that we're doing this sort of experience, so it's a little experimental, and we're excited about that. But it's going to be awesome. It runs the same time as Preface, and both of these things have free childcare. So for those of you who have brought small humans into your life, you have no excuses not to come because we will take care of them for you for free. Which that alone is probably like reason to come. Like make this your date night or something like that. Like just join us. It's going to be a great time. 4 weeks. But then we have a number of other really, really important events coming up. We have the Parkview documentary screening, which we announced last week. Really, really important opportunity to educate ourselves, stand in solidarity with our LGBTQIA siblings. This is a heavy movie. Just want to warn you about that. The information in it is a bit sobering, but an important opportunity for us to come around the LGBTQI community, both here in Charlotte and abroad. And then 2 days later, a concert with Trey Pearson. These events in certain ways go together. Both of them are opportunities to stand in solidarity with the LGBTQIA community. One more educational, one more healing and celebratory, but we would encourage you to sign up for both of them. And then a whole bunch of other stuff coming in the summer. Adult VBS, which we've told you about. Kind of the big idea here is all of this is on the Watershed app. So if you don't have the app downloaded, and we know that about 135 of you do have the app downloaded, which means you're going to hear some fun numbers from Matt later. That's a relatively small percentage of the Watershed population. So you guys are missing out on all the fun things that we've hid in the app, all the Easter eggs and stuff like that. I don't know if there's Easter eggs in there, but the app is awesome, and it is the best way to kind of know what's going on here at Watershed. So, okay, that's pretty much it for me. The last thing I want to mention is we are wrapping up the Nevertheless series this morning. You're going to hear from Matt in a moment a little bit more about where we're going with that. Kicking off a brand new series next month, talking about spiritual freedom. It's going to, navigate the intersections of Pride Month coming up, Juneteenth in June. Lots of opportunities to talk about just freedom, the lack of it, the need of it, and where that intersects with faith and spirituality. So we would invite you back next week, assuming you're in town, to hang out with us once again. So happy to have you here.
Take the boys for a walk. Just a normal Saturday. I found a bed of roses. I wondered what they would say. Learn to love the sunshine. Learn to love the rain. 'Cause seeds are better growing. Both are coming the same. The journey's never easy. The deeper the roots run, find that you're at peace when the heavy winter comes. Ooh, we're all running from something. Ooh, we're waiting for that next moment. Ooh, we're all running from something. Ooh, we're waiting for that next moment. 'Cause our yesterdays are gone and they ain't coming back around. Tomorrow comes when it comes, you ain't gotta hunt it down. And then maybe the hardest part is understanding how to be here now. Now I'm looking at the ocean like a mirror back at me. Who are you becoming? Who do you want to be? 'Cause the years are like the waves now. They come and then they leave. But the sunset in this moment never again will be. Ooh, we're all running from something. Ooh, we're waiting for that next moment. 'Cause our yesterdays are gone and they ain't coming back around. And tomorrow comes when it comes, you ain't gotta hunt it down. And then maybe
morning. My name is Matt, and I'm the lead pastor here. I'm sorry, I find humor in things sometimes. This has nothing to do with this morning, just for the record. But that song that Austin just sang, how many of you know what that's from? Okay, so if you're a Ted Lasso fan, and if you know me, you know I am. I had nothing to do with that song, but I was just laughing because last night, my wife and I were home, and I was watching YouTube, and I ran across something that said, Top 10 Made You Ugly Cry Moments of Ted Lasso. And I watched it, and they were right, because I'm just like boo-hooing. So I just think that's funny. I also think it's funny. I don't know why I think that's funny, but it's like sometimes when you come in, we'll have ropes on the backs of the chairs to kind of push people forward, and when we don't, it's like, how far away from Matt can I sit? I'm going, do I smell? Do I spit when I talk? Is it both? I don't know. So that has nothing to do with this morning, but I'm glad you're here nonetheless. Again, I'm the lead pastor. My name's Matt, and this is the last Sunday morning of a series that we've entitled Nevertheless. In case you missed it, I hope you take the opportunity to go back. We've got a YouTube channel, and we've got a podcast. I think what we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks has been really helpful and important. But really, the thing that we've been describing over the last 3, now 4 weeks is a response to the question, why are you here? If you remember the first week, that was the opening question. Why do you drive from so far away? Why do you show up here on a Sunday morning? And the major thematic thread was hope. That somewhere in the animation of Watershed as a community awakening, struggling, and loving together as though a different world is possible, there's some sense of a tide of hope that's constantly rising here. And so it's just been really good. It's been enjoyable. It's been meaningful. And this is the last morning that we're together for this series per se. And there's this place that I want to try to take us today. But in order to go there, I'm going to need to kind of backtrack just a bit. And I want to take just a moment to point to one of the stories that we started with 4 weeks ago. It's a story that's found in the book of Acts chapter 2. It's really the story of the church starting this group of people, this pretty large community of people that had pledged allegiance to Jesus, but who also were being brutalized. They were being exploited. They were being oppressed. They were suffering under the pressure of political and religious power brokers of their day. And nevertheless, they were trying to figure out, what does it mean for us to be together? What does it mean for us to support one another and to work together and to thrive and live? And it says in verse 44 that they were all together. They had everything in common. It says they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And so I mentioned several weeks ago that when you take a look at the outcome of this first iteration of the church, there's this assumption that we can make that those people chose integration over separation, that they refused to see themselves as sort of this entity outside of everything that is experiencing an external world, but actually they're entering into the larger complexity of the whole. In fact, you heard a story, speaking of ugly cry. I saw some of you ugly cry the first week in the introduction of some friends that have been instrumental in this community, the Bobbitt Miller family, who, because of their willingness to see themselves as integrated versus separate, we now enjoy the fruit of that choice. Like, there's hope here because of something that happened a decade ago. And I wanted to mention that because while I think that is certainly true for the story in the first century, I think there's some pragmatic or practical things about this story that kind of get overlooked or dismissed. And so I want to speak more practically from the standpoint of the story makes it seem as though like there was this mystical experience and everybody just kind of showed up and handed all their stuff over. I don't think that's how it worked. I don't think it was that storybook. If I had to bet, there was a lot of work and effort that went into measuring the depth of everything. Like, who has what? What do we have? What do we need together? And then what is it that we're asking one another for? What does it mean to examine depth? And then out of that depth, the hope that we see animated is also a part of the equation, not just the idea of integration. And so it's been about 4 years since Watershed has had a conversation around depth as it pertains to what do we have, what does our community have, and then what do we really need. In the midst of a pandemic and all the other things that we went through over the last 3 or 4 years, it was almost impossible to really ask that question. That's not true today. And so this morning, I want to try to point to some things that after about a 60-day process as a staff and a community of leaders, we think this is what depth looks like for us. And I think it's an interesting conversation. I think it's a pivotal conversation. And I want to try to help you see this, but I'm going to have to swim at more of a granular level this morning. So kind of buckle up your seats, and then here we go. All right? So the first week that I stood up and we started talking about hope, I asked the question, why are you here? And there were about close to 140 people in seats. That's pretty standard for the first 18 weeks of 2023. There's about 242 people that show up here on a weekend, on average, the first quarter and a half of this year. So that's significant. That's a 30% gain compared to the first 18 weeks of last year, and a 60% gain compared to 2 years ago. So that there's a growing depth in just the number of people who show up here on a Sunday morning, but that's a little bit of a deceptive number, and here's why. Because if you cross-reference households, adults, children who have participated over multiple formats and environments, just from November of 2022 to the end of March 2023, instead of 242 people, we're actually looking at about 735. That's significant. And that 735 really breaks down to about 350 households. So like entities, whether you're a person who is unmarried or a person that's married or have a partner or you have children, whatever your household looks like, there's 350 of them here at Watershed. 140 families with children equates to about 280 total kids. And this too, there's more depth than just people showing up, right? Like there's other things that are going on here. 6 days of the week, there's Watershed. It's not just one day of the week, it's Watershed. And so what is happening along the lines of development and community enrichment, you could call it. Again, if you were to use similar metrics, just within the past year or so, there was 668, and we're going to call them occurrences or involvements that happen within community here, and you can kind of see the breakdown. A couple of things that I'm really excited about. One is regional collectives. Almost 250 of you signed up or were signed up. I may have thrown you in there. Maybe. It's a rumor that I will viciously deny. No one really complained too much, and if they did, it was with Samantha, so there you go. 250 of you are enrolled in these things. They're happening tonight, and if you haven't RSVP'd, would you please do that, because these things are starting to take on a life of their own. The North version, I think, has about 25 to 30 people that are going to show up. Yeah, wow. So what started out as collectives now feels like a block party. Yeah, I'll take that. Bonus points if you get the police called on you. I'll just say that. Where was I? Oh, yes. 668 occurrences. And this might be worth mentioning, too. And I mentioned this to someone coming in. I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about numbers, and you're going to see, like, grids and graphs and stuff. That's not normally how things work around here. But if you're a person that, likes that stuff, like you look at a spreadsheet and you're like, yeah. This morning, I'm going to be speaking your love language a little bit. But this is a snapshot, a picture of the depth of our community in terms of involvement and development. By the way, that category that says other, blocks, book clubs, other small group type environments where there's specific things or real particular things being talked about, that's woefully underdeveloped. 4 years ago, that number would be 4 times that size. And so I'm hopeful that in the months and the years ahead, that's really going to grow. But that's involvement, that's development, that's enrichment. Can I show you what depth looks like in terms of volunteering? As of today, about 146 different volunteer roles exist here. And I want to be specific. That's roles, that's not people. Because Jeff serves in production, is in Greenhouse as a volunteer, is a liaison in regional collectives, and leads a book club. So he screws with the curve, right? Martha works as someone on a hospitality team and as a regional collective. Oliver is in production team, serves on our lead team, and is a leader in Kindred. And so that's less than 100 people when you start realizing there's a lot of overlap there, which means about 19% of that 400 plus group of adults is providing 100% of the experience that we all say we experience hope in. Now, I need you to let that sink in for a moment. All right, let that kind of work on you. And if hearing that Jeff serves 4 times or is signed up for 4 different teams, and you aren't signed up for anything, if that creates a little bit of discomfort, good. I'm actually okay with that. I can't really help you there. For the record, it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me want to volunteer around here. But 19% carrying 100% of the workload. That needs to change, right? Something's got to happen there. The first week, I said we're going to be asking something of you every week, and I don't have time to recap every single thing, but there should be a slide. This is kind of what we've talked about so far. Would you do these things? Would you start to factor these things in your life? Because these are the ways that we feel like hope as a part of the overall arching heartbeat and structure and system begins to animate through and course kind of through us, in us and through us. But the first week I talked, I said something I've never said here before, and I don't know why it took me so long to say this, but I said hospitality is everybody's job here. I know we have a team, but everybody should be working in the effort to be hospitable to one another as we come and go here. And I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that ideally volunteering is everybody's job here as well, at least in a seasonal account. And I know there's nuances to this. I know for some folks there are legitimate reasons why that is really tough, and I'm not being dismissive of that. But there's about 8 to 10 areas that we aspire to develop here that I think would really breathe life and even more hope into the world, but because of some obstacles that we're having to work through, one of which is we need a deeper pool of volunteers to pull from if we're going to do these things. Right now, our focus is in 4 specific areas. Families, which is basically kids and students, the experience of a brand new person here at Watershed, i.e. hospitality, the experience of our Sunday gathering, and the safety of our community. Family ministries right now, on any given Sunday, has somewhere between 80 and 120 students. There's 55 volunteers that are spread out over the course of a month. They serve a couple times a month, 1 to 2 times, and that's not enough people. And the reason it's not enough people is that a week barely goes by where Blair doesn't receive some sort of call out and then has to somehow last minute make that work. And she is masterful at kind of threading all those needles, but there's been mornings, and there will be mornings if we can't get the tide to rise, where we have to shut a classroom down and we have to merge students together. And so all of a sudden you got age groups in there that aren't really, it's not ideal for them to be together, but it's the best that we can do because, again, the depth isn't what we need it to be right now. And when that happens, who absorbs that deficit? Well, it's not us sitting in this room, it's our kids. The kids that we say we love and we value. Our production team provides technical support for our weekends on site and for our weekend on site and virtual gatherings. Every week, it takes about 5 to 6 weeks to run those teams. Desmond Smith, again, who is masterful at leading those teams, every week is just about every week is like, we're a little short this week. And sometimes I'll see people like doing the whole, all right, I'm running this over here and I'm running that over here at the same time. So if a slide gets missed, it's not because of incompetency, it's because I'm trying to, you remember 2 weeks ago when Lewis was playing the guitar and the drum and singing, and it looked like any minute he was going to pull a harmonica out and start playing that too? That's a little bit of what happens in the production area. Sometimes our staff has to step in and play that role, and we're fine to do that. The problem is that pulls us out of the role that we were supposed to be playing that morning, and then whatever environment or whatever person was supposed to be receiving our full attention is now paying the price for the absence of depth. And so instead of 22 people, he needs more like 32 people. When only about 50 adults were showing up here on a weekend 2 years ago, 9 people on our hospitality team made sense. But we've almost tripled that number. And so it's too little to provide for our crowds, the care and the support they need. David's hospitality team needs about 9 more people. We feel really, really safe in this neighborhood and in this building. But in today's world, it's an issue of being responsible and being good stewards to make sure you have plans that make sure that you're present to what's happening in this space at the outside chance that there is some sort of crisis. We've never had a security team here. We think that's important, but we would need 10 people to make sure that that starts to take place. And simply put, we need 75 more people to help strengthen and mature the infrastructure to support the growth of the last 12 months and the growth that we think we're going to see moving forward. It might be worth making this point. You see the QR codes on the back of the cards on the chairs, and you probably have a card in your hand. This series is transitioning into a campaign for the rest of this year because we want to continue to put this out in the forefront of our community. What we've learned is that when we communicate our needs and then we tell you why that's really important and how that ties into the value of who we are, you respond. And so in the weeks ahead, you're going to be hearing more about this, and there's actually a page on our website that reflects everything that I'm talking about. But the ask this morning, the first ask is, will you volunteer? Will you serve? Would you sacrifice your comfort and your convenience? If you're currently not volunteering, will you begin? That's the first ask. And then there's the second ask. And I'm going to preface this ask by acknowledging that anytime you talk about money in a church, it can be a trigger point for someone, and that makes sense. It's no secret that there have been plenty of spiritual communities, churches, whatnot, have mishandled the conversation, have mishandled the use of resources. And so I want to acknowledge that I know there's trauma in the room around some of this, myself included. And if you're brand new with us, or if you've only been coming for a while, can I just tell you, this is not what every Sunday looks like. Can I promise you that's spreadsheets and pie graphs and all that stuff? That is not my jam. But I also want to let you know that there's nothing expected of you today. And so our hope, or the only thing we're asking of you, is that maybe you come back sometime real soon and you give us the chance, or give us together the chance to get to know each other a little bit better. But what does depth for Watershed look like as it relates to finances. For those of you who have been a part of this thing for the last year or so, you might recall that in 2022, the end of 2022, was a little bit of a wild experience, right? By the close of 2022, we just finished upgrading the downstairs, renovating the downstairs to upgrade the kids' experience. We had recovered over $50,000 of a $60,000 deficit. And then we went into the first, first 8 months or so of the year feeling a lot of financial momentum. Part of the renovation fruit was opening up a few extra classrooms down this hallway so that we could take on some local businesses who rented space from us and create an additional income flow. We had experienced quite a bit of attrition over the pandemic and over the social political landscape. And so in order to create stability and sustainability, we rented 6 different rooms. That infused our budget by $130,000 a year. $11,000 a month was giving us the white space we needed as the community started to rise in terms of who's coming, who's giving. The first 16, is that right? No, every 4 weeks, I'll put it this way. Every 4 weeks for the first 3 months of 2023, we were seeing an $1,100 gain in giving. This community saw 19 new households start to give in 2023. So, it was working. The plan was working. All kinds of momentum. So as the gap is closing, I need to push pause because there's a part 2 to the story, and I want to ask a different question. If someone were to ask, what does money do around here? When money is given, what's really happening with that? How does Watershed spend its money? And there's really 2 ways to answer that. There's the literal way. It costs X amount for salaries, X amount for mortgages and lights, X amount for curriculum, for coffee, for paper clips, right? Those are particulars, and those particulars are important, right? I've got a spreadsheet. Again, here we go, spreadsheets. I've got a spreadsheet with all these line items. It's in size 4 font. If you want it, you can read it. You'll need a magnifying glass. But it deals in the particulars, and there's great accountability to put the particulars with our lead team. But I don't think that's what someone's really asking when they ask the question, how does money get spent? I think what they really want to know is, what kind of impact are we having? What's being fueled here? What's being animated? You say hope is being animated. Okay, what does that look like? Well, let's start with family ministries. There's somewhere between 90 to 100 kids, 18 or so adult volunteers who every weekend show up here. And if you consider the overlap of staff salaries, what it costs to run the building, what it theoretically costs per square foot for our family ministry space, supplies, curriculum, speculatively, there's an estimate that it costs about $146,000 of our budget for greenhouse and shed students to be cared for, to be developed, to be created. It's about 23% of our annual budget. It's spread out over 8 rooms. It costs about $352 a week per room based on those numbers. It's about $33 per student or per spot on a Sunday morning. And if you disperse that total across 280 kids, that's about $45 a month per kid. Using this same logic, if you factor in our teaching team and our staff salaries on Sundays, because those are developmental posts. If you think about reclamation and preface, it costs about $90,000 for development towards our adults to take place each year. Preface and reclamation alone, we estimate, costs about $20,000 total. I'm going to be starting preface on the 31st, and based on all those overlaps, it's probably about, $1,600 to $1,800, $1,700 per session, like 4 sessions. So, I mean, you do the math. If we usually have about 20 people, that's about $90 a person that it costs Watershed, about $22 a night. Liberation. This is where I get really excited. Liberation is much broader. It encompasses way more than just the 4 partnerships that you may have seen walking through the 2 doors on a Sunday morning on that wall to your left. More than ever today, justice, liberation is baked into our systems. It's baked into our structures. That's an ongoing endeavor to make sure that we're interrogating ourselves such that that continues to expand. It makes it a little bit harder to quantify, but maybe you weren't aware of this. 6 nights a week in this building, somewhere between 200 and 250 people meet in this space to practice recovery, to support one another in sobriety, and to create community in within our partnerships with recovery communities. On Wednesday night, between 80 and 150 people, depending on which week you catch them, there's the largest Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm sorry? CA meeting. The largest CA meeting happens in this room, and people sit in these chairs that you're sitting in right now. The leader of that group told Samantha Cordellini, our director of communications and creativity, that if they ever had to leave, they just don't know what that would mean, because there's just not very many places that offer this size of a space and do that with such generosity. 8 to 10 times a year, around anywhere between 30 to 100, depending on what the environment is, people gather together here under the leadership of Pastor Kim Honeycutt and ICU's talk. Slow clapping, right? 100 or so people gather to focus on mental health, emotional health. Realistically, if you rented this room, a size like this, a room this size in another part of the city, you're probably looking at $600 to $800 a night. To rent a downstairs mid-size gathering space where the rest of the recovery groups meet, that's about $200 a night. And so when you factor in the value that our building as a resource is providing and being given away in partnerships that help heal and save lives and animate hope, when you consider the work being done with Bethany Christian Services in their immigrant family child reunification program, when you take all of this into consideration and all the overlaps and nuances, conceivably, you could argue that about 17% of our resources fuel the work of liberation. And I could keep going. I don't have time to do the others this morning, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there's more going on here than paper clips. So much more. Which brings me to part 2 of the story. Blazing into 2023. So much energy. So much momentum. Every tide is rising. And then about 5 weeks ago, during a routine walkthrough with the city, we were informed that because of zoning issues, our tenants are going to have to be asked to leave. So that's $130,000 of our budget, $11,000 of our monthly fuel. Now, the good news is it's not happening overnight, but we've already excused one tenant. Another one leaves in August, 2 more in November, and the last 2 sometime in February. We had no idea this was problematic. It was a bit of a gut punch. You know, for the last month or so, it's like all we've been able to talk about as a staff. It's been really hard, a lot of tears, a lot of anguish. Like, how do you replace $11,000 a month and do it rather quickly because it's June. And it's like the end is coming quickly. And in a series that's supposed to be about hope, I realized that just kind of threw a little water on the fire this morning. So, guilty as charged. But ironically, it's taken us about 5 weeks to get here, but there's actually some really optimistic reasons to think, we're going to be in great shape, provided a few things are true. Well, the first thing that created optimism for me was last fall when we stood up and announced, here's the strategy moving forward. I don't know if it got lost in the chaos of everything that we said, but I said from here, being in the rental industry is not our long-term goal, and it's not to our benefit. At some point, we're going to have to figure out how to reclaim those rooms, because when we grow, we're going to need more space, which Blair says is already happening. And as we grow, we want to be able to leverage that space in ways that make sense for our mission out of a place of thriving versus survival. And so this is a little sooner than we had hoped for, but it's kind of holding our feet to the fire, and it's actually giving us a runway. The second thing that creates optimism is over the last 5 to 6 weeks between our staff and our lead team and budget cuts, we've put ourselves within striking distance to replace that additional $11,000 of resources that we need. So simply put, we've managed to close the gap. In the name of full transparency, this has been incredibly painful. It's painful because it's going to impact just about every ministry area at some level, some more than others, but also because it affects the salaries of some of our staff, myself included. I'm taking a pay cut starting June 1st, and until the tide is flowing, until the big arrows are pointing in the right direction, that just makes sense from my perspective and from our lead team and staff's perspective. But in all of these adjustments, we've been able to move that number, $11,000 of additional need, to where it's only $6,000 of additional need. $11,000 extra felt like Mount Everest. $6,000 feels like a dare. Like, I dare you. You see what I'm saying? It's like we can do that. $11,000, oh my gosh, that seemed like a bridge too far. So here's the third reason there's optimism. This is what depth looks like in terms of our community and how you as Watershed show up in the way that your resources flow. This is a breakdown of the 350 households that we believe are a part of Watershed, and they run from November of 2022 to March of 2023. So many of you have jumped into recurring giving over the last 2 or 3 years. The collectivity is literally saving us. It's literally animating everything we've been describing for the last 4 weeks. I don't know if you folks hadn't responded week after week, month after month, I don't know what the conversation would look like right now. So there's a part of us that is like, my God, this community is inspiring. Having said that, the other optimistic part of this is there's a lot of space to develop financially here as a community. For someone that is yet to start giving at Watershed, or someone who gives at modest amounts, there's a huge opportunity to have a huge impact. And I want to be really mindful. For folks who give at a modest level, I know what appears to be modest is actually sacrificial for you. So I want to name that publicly. I also will say that in some of the modesty here is because that's what we've asked of you. So when we stand up on a Sunday and say we need 5 new recurring families at $100 or more a month, and you hear that, you go, I'm in for 100, because what did you hear? 100. But last year when we were going through some of this, there were families that went from 0 to 600, 0 to 800, 200 to 1,000. And so as you're hearing this, I'm asking you to consider not what the the baseline level is, but like, what is it that you're inspired to do? And this might be helpful to kind of hear. Right now, if we had 60 families increase by $100, it'd be game over. Right? $100 more a month with 60 families. If 40 families did 100 more and 20 did 200, game over. So you can start to see how these numbers begin to play out, and it becomes very achievable. This too, our staff, our lead team, and our teaching team together are on track to provide 8% of the budget. $53,000 is going to flow out from those 3 leadership entities here at Watershed. That's an average of $339 a month from the people who say, I'm out in front leading here. And I'm telling you this because I want you to know that the leadership here is not doing anything. They're not asking you to do something that they're not willing to do themselves. And to make to enrich the conversation a bit more, I went to our staff and our lead team, and I said, is there anything additional that you'd be willing to do before I stand up on Sunday? And the totality of that was another $800. So it's really not $6,000 more, it's $5,200. We haven't even left the building today, and we're already on our way. I'll say this too, and this might be oversharing, and I'm going to apologize. My family has been giving well north of $500 for most of the last 18 years, $500 a month. We're going up $200. This matters. This is important. What we have here, according to you, is wildly special. That the world needs more places like Watershed. And so on the back of your chair and in your seat, there's a postcard. And I know for some of you, you're like, you know what, I know exactly what I need to do, and here it is. And you can follow the QR code. In fact, if you haven't just at least seen seen what is on the other side of this, I really encourage you to pull that up because it takes you to a page where the campaign is now started. And if you know what you can do today in terms of giving and if volunteering, please go ahead and get started. Help us know what the momentum looks like. For some of you, you need to go home and talk to your family. You need to look at your spreadsheets, right? But would you take the next week to 3 weeks and meditate and pray and reflect and try to hear what your heart is saying in all of this? And I did this the first week we were together. I got to the end of my talk, or at least you thought it was the end of my talk. And I said, if what I've just said isn't inspiring enough, if you need just a little bit more, then I want to tell this story. Well, this morning I don't have a story to tell. It's actually my friend Brooke. Brooke, why don't you come on up? Give Brooke a round of applause this morning. Brooke and I have been friends for 17 years. She hasn't kicked me to the curb yet. But would you take just a moment and describe why this community has mattered to you for so long?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm what I like to call OG Watershed, which means I came here in 2006. And I came here because I got a postcard in my mailbox, and it had 2 things on it: a glass of wine and a literary quote. And surprisingly, it was an advertisement for a church. And I thought, hey, they read books other than the God began what would be a slow process of healing from years of trauma. It's a process that I'm still undergoing. A few years into my journey, I met a guy who played bass in Watershed's band named Dana. He's not back there. Yeah, there he is. All right. Woohoo! And I ended up marrying him almost 14 years ago. And guess who married us? This too was an exercise in hope I believe God orchestrated to bring about healing in both of our lives. A healing Watershed has played a very significant role in. Before I met Dana, I never believed I was an inherently lovable person. I viewed love as a transactional exchange and expressed as much in premarital counseling when I told Dana and the counselor that unconditional love was BS. Shockingly, this viewpoint can have negative implications on your faith journey. Who knew? I mean, I thought it was reasonable. Somehow, Dana recognized residual trauma informed my belief system. Beliefs I held not just about human relationships, but God. Dana looked past all the crap that kept me from being the woman God truly intended me to be and saw she was already there. He hoped in that person before I even did. His love and Watershed's acceptance gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, God was similar. Perhaps God, too, had been tarnished by centuries of trauma at the hands of organized religion. And the God I feared would reject and harm me wasn't God, but man's misappropriation of him. I wish I could stop my story here, but I can't. Marriage isn't easy, and I wasn't the only person who struggled in the relationship. Dana, who has given me his full permission to share this, struggled with drug addiction and alcoholism, and a few years into our marriage, he relapsed. I was devastated and hopeless during this period. Yet again, I went back to the belief that God was angry at me, and this was happening because it was my fault, and I had failed. Yet again, Watershed rallied around me to combat these false beliefs. Watershed showed up for both me and Dana in a living, breathing representation of Christ's love. We cried with Watershed members. We were prayed for by Watershed members. Donna and my friend Rachel even prayed for me in a Watershed bathroom when I broke down there. So that's dedication. The most important thing Watershed did was believe in us both and remind us of God's love during some of our darkest hours. So, of course, what did I do? This is the embarrassing part. I left Watershed. Yep, you heard me correctly. Have I mentioned people with trauma do really stupid things sometimes? This was around the same time Watershed itself was having a spiritual evolution. Dana was still struggling with addiction, and one of the ways I coped with unpredictability and uncertainty, which is something I literally have never experienced life without, was an unhealthy need for black and white thinking. The unknown was truly my absolute worst fear. I needed to know who was safe and who wasn't, what was expected of me and what wasn't. I didn't realize it at the time, but I needed to know how to behave in a transactional relationship with God so that I wouldn't be hurt or rejected or punished by him. This type of thinking doesn't mesh well with a church dismantling the very container I'd felt so safe in. I didn't leave because I disagreed with views on homosexuality or theology. I didn't leave with any animosity or ill will. I left because I needed a safety I feared Watershed could no longer provide. In spite of the harm I'd suffered because of religious regulations and misinterpretations of God, I wanted Watershed to define the divine so I could feel safe in a relationship with God. Turns out, Watershed was unraveling those very same definitions to provide a place to safely seek relationship with God. I just couldn't wrap my head around it at the time. So you might be wondering what the heck I'm doing here. Surprise, I came back. Dana, who, for the record, never wanted to leave in the first place. Yeah, he's better. You are. Expressed a desire to start playing with the band again towards the end of COVID. And I started coming to Watershed to watch him when he played. One Sunday, I set up my camp chair literally as far as I could possibly get from the screens that they had outside and all the other people, when Matt came out to start greeting people. And when he got to me, he said, "Could you be any further away?" And I, in true Enneagram 8 fashion, said, "You ought to just be glad I'm here." This is a true story. As I said it, though, a funny thing happened. I realized I was glad I was there. As soon as I'd started coming to Watershed again, a funny thing had happened. It felt like home. I felt welcome. And somehow I felt accepted in spite of having been a dropout for a few years. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'd needed a space to process the effects of trauma in my life and the impact it had on my beliefs. Very funny story. One of the places that I processed this was my Watershed block, which shout out to her girl. I know you guys are here and supporting me. And I never left, even though I quit the church. I kept going to my block. While I still have a lot of healing to do, and while I recognize spirituality is a lifelong process and relationship with God is a daily practice, my return has brought fresh hope. It's the hope of the intimacy Paul hints at in 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. I've realized that Watershed saw and still sees God, a lot like Dana saw me all those years ago when we first met. There's more beneath the surface. God isn't limited by man's dim definition of him because man can't define the divine. Watershed hoped in the glimmers of God's true nature they saw beneath the surface of organized religion. Watershed also hoped in me. Hoped I too would find enough healing and traction to let go of the fear that kept me from fully embracing a God beyond my understanding and trust in the glimmers of love he had consistently shown me. Watershed was and is one of those glimmers. I find hope reflected in Watershed because I find God there, just like I found him on that postcard in my mailbox 17 years ago.
Would you stand as we close this morning by singing together?
No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn watershed. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. Lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
It's a watershed. Will you, if you feel comfortable doing this, would you say this with me? We are a community. I like the way you said that. We are a community. Awakening and struggling. Loving together. As though a different world is possible. Today. We are a community of hope. God, thank you. Thank you for giving us language that, with all of your greatness and nuance and mystery, helps us orient around the love that we experience through one another, that we are fully aware of comes straight from you. May this love transform us. May it open us up. May it open our hands up, not just to one another, but to the world that longs to experience the type of hope that we are privileged to experience with one another. And God, this is a gift. And may the hope that we feel, the hope that we receive, the hope that is being animated in and through us, may we show up with a wild spirit of gratitude. We love you, God. And it's in the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Peace on your weekend. Hey, bud. How you doing?